this for all its sorrow. One world shaping one tomorrow. One humanity, though riven, we to whom a world is given. From one world there is no turning, for one world the prophets yearning. One the world of poets, sages, one world, goal of all the ages. World so eagerly expected, world so recklessly rejected, one as common folk have willed it, one as covenants can build it. World of friendly ways and faces, cherished arts and honored races, one world free in word and science, people free, its firm reliance. One world, this for all its sorrow, one world shaping one tomorrow, one humanity, though riven, we to whom a world is given. From one world there is no turning, for one world the prophets yearning. One the world of prophets, sages, one world goal of all the ages.
Welcome to the live in-person and live Zoom worship service of the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside. Our opening hymn this morning is number 127, Can I See Another's Woe, from the Gray Hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn number 127, Can I See Another's Woe? Thank you for joining us here in person, and thank you for joining us remotely by Zoom, where we will continue live streaming and posting these services on our YouTube channel for our virtual attendees. I'm Ren Mansour, a member of the Worship Committee, and I will be your worship associate today. Other members of the worship committee who make this service possible include Alec Peck, our music coordinator, Adam Wedeking, who monitors our visual and online connections, and Kate Lewicki, who is in charge of our sound system. We welcome you to join us this morning with an open mind and an open heart, and with muted electronic devices, please. The Universalist part of our tradition encourages us to extend love and acceptance to all people, while our Unitarian heritage calls us to recognize the inherent good of all persons. Our principles call us to affirm the worth and dignity of every individual, to accept one another, and to foster each other's spiritual growth. What you bring, who you are, enriches us all. Welcome, and thank you for joining us here today. It is with deep sadness that we announce the loss of a beloved member of our UU family. Our friend Bill Rowe passed peacefully in his sleep last Tuesday at 1 a.m. He will be greatly missed. Join us at the church on Saturday, July 6th at 11 a.m. to celebrate the rich, full life of William Rowe. Before we move into the service, there are a few announcements we would like to share. We will mention several websites, email addresses, and phone numbers. At the end of the service, we will leave up a slide with all of this information, and it is available on our website. The monthly UUCR newsletter comes out at the first of every other month by email and, per request, by postal mail. If you have something newsworthy that you would like to contribute, email uuchurchofriverside.calendar@gmail.com or call the church office at 951-686-6515. If you would like to be added to our mailing list, please contact the church office. The Indivisible Riverside organization has invited UUCR to participate in a rally for reproductive rights. You are invited to stand with us on Friday, June 21st, to spread the message that we will not forget or forgive the MAGA Republicans for coming after our reproductive health care rights. A protest rally will be held on the public sidewalk of Tyler Street in Riverside starting at 5:30 p.m. Join us in demanding accountability of representatives like Ken Calvert and others working to undermine our reproductive rights. Remember to bring signs, water, and wear comfortable clothing. The congressional meeting will be held today in the sanctuary at noon. Please be sure to attend. We will be electing officers to the board, approving the budget, and making plans for the future of the church. Your input is important. Please join us for sandwiches that will be served before the congressional meeting. Church Council will meet on the second Friday of the month in the annex. The next meeting will be at 4 p.m. on June 14th. A special Father's Day service will be presented on June 16th. This will be an opportunity to honor our fathers and father figures by sharing stories and lessons that we learned from them. The altar will be prepared to display photos or mementos, and we invite you to bring something to share. Welcome to all of our guests today, and welcome back to our old friends. We would love to meet you during coffee hour after the service. If you're comfortable doing so, please give us a wave so that we can recognize you later. And for those on Zoom, you can use the Zoom wave gesture or just wave at your camera. We'd love to chat with you out in the parish hall, where you can also find our visitors book. Please leave your name before you leave so that we know you are here, and leave your contact information if you want updates on church events. For those online, the best way to get added to the mailing list is to email the church office at admin@uuchurchofriverside.org. And now I invite you to sit back and take a slow, deep breath as we move into the worship hour. You are welcome to read with me our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to live in service to humankind and all life in fellowship. Thus do we covenant. We are glad to welcome back UUCR member, Dr. Lee Greer, to speak with us today. Lee is an evolutionary biologist, educator, married to Linda, and father of 3. Lee and Linda have been members of UU Church of Riverside for years. Of our many sources, Universalism is rooted in the idea of the brotherhood of humanity from the prehistoric Axial Age. Especially within Abrahamic traditions, a similar idea appeared, which saw the ultimate reconciliation of all of God's children, ἀποκατάστᾰσις, resting on the earliest understanding of resurrection and of the unity of God. Christianity became more imperial after the 325 CE Council of Nicaea, as these ideas faded. By 500 CE, Universalism was eclipsed from a widespread view into a minority, treasured by a few dissenters until its revival in more recent centuries. We will look at that original kernel of ἀποκατάστᾰσις. We have 2 lightings of sacred flames. The first is a remembrance candle for the indigenous peoples. We remember that underneath is the unceded land of indigenous peoples, the Serrano, the Cahuilla, the Luiseño, and the Cupeño. We light this sacred flame in their remembrance and in recognition of their struggle for self-determination and dignity that continues to this day. Our second sacred flame is our own chalice, the symbol of our faith. Today, the universalist part of our faith. If others go to hell, then I will too. But I do not believe that. On the contrary, I believe that all will be saved, myself included with them, something which arouses my deepest amazement. Søren Kierkegaard, a Christian existentialist philosopher, born 1813, died 1855. Now is our time for sharing our treasure for our historical church. There are 4 ways we can donate. In the offertory plate today, at the church office, by mail to the address on the screen, or electronically, PayPal, QR code, Cash App, or on our website, uuchurchofriverside.org. Stater Brothers Market gives our church a rebate on Stater grocery cards, which we have in church each Sunday. Amazon gift cards are also available. You get the full value, and the church also receives a percentage for free. Please see Kate or Robert Brown in the church office if you are interested in purchasing the gift cards. Please donate as the Spirit moves you, by whatever method works best for you. Thank you for your generosity. To those who give of your time and talent, thank you for your generous care and attention. To all of you who have joined us here today, thank you for the gift of your presence. Will our ushers now please come forward to receive the collection? A bag will also be passed around to collect food and hygiene donations for those in need. Next hymn is number 1010, We Give Thanks, from the Teal hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn number 1010, We Give Thanks.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
And now, please welcome Dr. Lee Greer, speaking to us on Universalism, the other half of UU, Part 1.
Good morning. I would like you to engage in a meditation first. We're going to start with a meditation here, and I will proceed to screen share. Okay, and this meditation, you may feel free to close your eyes or open them. However, I want you to think beyond just the words and think the thoughts with me. Postulate that God is not a being among beings, but rather the ground of being, or of being and non-being itself, which does not exist, but is beyond essence and existence. The unconditioned necessary, the unified infinity from which innumerable differentiated infinities arise and back into which they subside. That's all of us, by the way. such that there is a one-to-one correspondence between every one of the contingent innumerable infinities and a corresponding point of the undivided infinity in infinite unity. There's something in Cantorian set theory which corresponds to that. Therefore, laying those premises, therefore, every contingent being reflects a unique facet of the undivided, necessary, infinite being or non-being, and not one is lost nor can be lost without a loss to being or non-being. Since that undifferentiated necessary being or non-being encompasses the highest ideal of love, love being among the qualia which exist, which it must of necessity do, and since all that must exist, then no sentient, individual sentient being can be lost without diminishing the undivided infinity, which would be a contradiction. Quod erat demonstrandum, QED. Which is Latin for it is demonstrated. That's the language of a formal proof there. Okay, so I'm going to escape for just a second and move up to our presentation. Just a second here. There we go. Just a moment. We'll go ahead and to the front. Okay, so what I would like to do today is lead you on the start of a subject, not the finishing of the subject, but introduce it. Within our faith, and this by the way, this church was called Universalist Unitarian, or before there was such a thing as the UUA. Before there was a Universalist Unitarian Association, this was called a Universalist Unitarian Church, and that was in the 1930s. And I saw it on some old plans that the city let us have of this building. So before there was a merger, that was true of this church. And here's the symbol that was used for the Universalist part, okay? It just so happens that in the early, and we're going to examine this. Now, I recognize that this congregation, as Unitarian Universalists are everywhere, many of them are refugees. Many of you and me included are refugees from the Abrahamic religions, either through abusive theology or bad experiences, or the way people treated us, or the history of institutional religions. Okay, but we're going to set that part aside and examine this, because this is one of the sources of our tradition. Remembering what our 7 principles are, and the value that we place on every individual and all expressions of love, and then looking out into the vast universe and across a heritage of those who have suffered persecution and ostracization and loss of life, even for standing up for principles which to us we hold sacred, and that is down across the centuries. Of course, if we're going to go back to the roots of Christianity part, we have to remember that we're in the world of the ancient Greeks, the Hellenistic world, which was the controlling culture, the dominant culture in the Roman Empire, the Greco-Hellenism. Okay, and there were some quite advanced ideas that were circulating at that time. Among them were the Stoics, okay, who actually were first to the universalistic ideas. They followed some others in the East, like Buddhism and so forth. Before the Abrahamic traditions, regarded this as a value, the Stoics were there first. And that's important to realize. But there was a transition which occurred. And of course, just we won't go through it, but just a reminder that Euthyphro's dialogue in the Socratic dialogue and Plato's dialogues, the most important of them, ask the question, do the gods set the standard for piety and morality, or is there a universal standard to which even the gods must adhere? And of course, all of us know exactly the answer to that. It's the latter. There's a universal standard to which even the gods have to adjust themselves to. All those many gods which humans have contrived over the centuries. All right, so we're going to move to Palestine in the 1st century CE. And of course, we are memorializing of the passing of our brother here. Let's also memorialize the passing of and massacre of so many that is occurring in historic Palestine. So remember that historic Palestine has been called Palestine or some derivative of it for close to 4 millennia. Whatever the mythologies that are said, otherwise that's the fact. And it's always been multicultural and multi-religious. And so we're going back to the time of Jesus, a Palestinian Jew. Okay, that means a Jew who lived in the toponym, the land of Palestine. Okay, and so this is in the beginning of the Christian era, or what we call the 1st century CE of the Common Era. Palestine North, this is Palestine South. Of course, this is the area which is also called the Galilee. It just so happens that there was a group of people at that time who were against the temple, okay, and against the animal sacrifices, and against swearing, and against stealing, and so forth. And they were all to be treated as equals, and they were called the Essenes. And they were at Qumran. The Dead Sea Scrolls come from this group, and we know much about early Christianity and the earliest Jesus movement because of this. And the earliest Christian movements came out of Essenism, which was in rebellion against the temple establishment in Jerusalem, which was collaborating, of course. Palestine was occupied then, as now, by the Romans at that time. Okay, now it's by the Western empires and Zionism and all of that, still occupied. Okay, so it was at that time, and of course we have mentions of this place by Pliny the Elder, and many common things, that were supposed to be done. You will notice parallels. There were a number of scrolls there which said there would be a time of restoration, eventually liberation of captives, restoring sight to the blind, so forth, raising the dead, interestingly enough, and bringing good news to the poor. The very sorts of things which we know from early pre-gospel sources were things that a radical peasant tekton, which is not the word for carpenter, by the way, it's a word for stonemason. Okay, somehow they got Jesus being carpenter, but tekton means a stonemason, and he was from the Galilee, like his family was. Of course, this is the great Caesarea Maritima on the Pacific, on the Mediterranean, and of course, Tiberias, which was also a Roman garrison town on the Sea of Galilee. Okay, and Nazareth, which was a small little village then, and only a few kilometers from a place which is never mentioned in the Gospels, is called Sepphoris. It's only 6 kilometers from Nazareth, and this is where the stonemasonry was done. So day workers would go there to do stonemasonry. Okay, so remember, Jesus was a tekton in Greek, not a carpenter. So, all right. Okay, and of course here is, and by the way, these paintings that I'm showing you here are based on archaeological digs that have been done. Crossan and Reed of excavating Jesus beneath the stones behind the texts. Reconstructions, including a first century fishing boat from the Sea of Galilee. And of course, here is what occupied Jerusalem looked like at that time. All right, if you can see my cursor here, it's a little bit, probably should have had a laser for this, but those online can see this too. Here is the high priest's house. Okay, this is the temple complex. Here's the western wall, what is now left of the Herod's temple. This is Herod's temple. This is the exchange here, okay, where there was a thriving business run by those who said, you've got to, in order to have forgiveness, you got to kill some animals, spill some blood. And guess what? We get to inspect it and see if it passes muster. If it doesn't, you have to buy our more expensive one. Okay, that was happening there. Okay, the priestly establishment was here, and this is the Antoninus fortress where the Roman garrison was. Okay, and Pontius Pilate, okay, was governor. Okay, Rome got tired of various things that were happening in this occupied territory, so they put it under direct governorship in the year 26 under Pontius Pilatus. Okay, so here's a comparison of the modern layout of the Temple Mount and the time then. Of course, here is actual direct archaeological evidence of Pontius Pilatus, the governor of Palestine South, which is southern Judea, okay, which included the Temple Mount. This is, of course, the famous Mount of Olives here. The west is behind us, and this causeway was so that the priestly class could walk across without acquiring ceremonial defilement by going through a marketplace. So they could go to the temple. All right, so now that's just a brief chronology. Our earliest source of the sayings of Jesus is the Q source. It's a source that is cited and somewhat perverted at times by Luke and Matthew, especially Matthew carries the perversion a little bit further, alters it to make it more domesticated, that what was actually being said. But some of the very famous things that you might have heard there from this time was, for instance, the parable of the house built on sand, the kingdom prayer, what is often called the Lord's Prayer, which, by the way, is not a Christian prayer. Have you ever noticed that? It's not a Christian prayer. Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who are indebted to us. In other words, no forgiveness except as we forgive others. That's not actually a Christian message. The usual standard Christian message is, well, you've got to believe in a certain sacrifice and all of that. Jesus wasn't a Christian. I have to remind you of that, okay? Jesus was not a Christian. He was a Palestinian Jew, but of a certain persuasion, not of the temple persuasion, okay? And the radical nature of that prayer, in part 2 and part 3, we'll go into some more on the Christian history. So here is essentially the sources. Q, and in the Gospel of Mark, Q is from before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. It's about the year 50. And Mark and all the other Gospels are written after the destruction of Jerusalem. Now, let's just take a moment and notice that all of your Gospels have very different and contradictory stories of Easter. Okay? Okay, and how did that happen? All right, that's the question. How did a simple view of spiritual resurrection become a complex corpse resuscitationist set of legends? Okay, or what the book of 2 Peter called sophisticated myths, and specifically rejects it, by the way. That's all in your New Testament, you know, okay. Well, it turns out there's a lot of confusion about these things because the later developments have been taken as the earliest accounts. But remember, the order of the books in your New Testament is not the order in which they were written. The Gospels are all written they're some of the last parts written in the New Testament. Some of the Pauline letters and source Q are some of the earliest. So the first century, of course, being from the year 1 to the year 100. And some of the New Testament is written after the year 100, the best scholarship shows. Well, a friend of mine, Richard C. Miller, has written a book. It was his doctoral dissertation, Resurrection and Reception in Early Christianity. And he went and showed that he worked under Dennis MacDonald at Claremont. He showed that the resurrection stories in our Gospels are patterned after Greco-Roman translation myth on multiple points, okay? And that they aren't the original tradition. We want to examine that original tradition. So there were two different traditions. One is based on a lunar calendar, which was the Jewish calendar, Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the solar calendar gives us our Easter tradition, and where on the first day of the week you have a corpse resuscitation, whereas on the 8th day you have a spiritual resurrection with sightings in Galilee. All of this is buried in the text in Constantine's canon, because, by the way, the 27 books of our New Testament and the 66 books of our Old Testament, particularly the 27 books of our New Testament now that are recognized, were established at the time of Constantine in the 4th century. So it's Constantine's canon. I'm going to remind you that Constantine was the emperor, Christianized emperor of Rome, and Rome was occupying Palestine, just like Palestine is occupied today. Okay, so there are two competing views of resurrection, and it is this which is called sophisticated myth, ses sophistimenos mythois. That's quoting from the second Peter, okay? And it specifically says that the stories told in the Gospels are sophisticated myths. And that's what Richard Miller showed in his massive doctoral dissertation. Okay. What actually happened during this time, of course, is the double burial practice that was practiced between 30 BCE and 70 CE. We won't review all of this because I've talked about this before here, but what would happen is when somebody died, okay, and this is documented, within this time, their body would be wrapped with spices, placed in a tomb, and left to rot for a year, and then the bones would be disarticulated and placed inside an ossuary, which was just slightly longer than your longest bone, which is your femur. Okay, so you'd be disarticulated and you'd be left like that. So there would be double burial practice, and we know that this is the case, and there have been thousands of these ossuaries found, many of them with inscriptions. Okay, and here's some work that has been done on one of them, where one person was found within. This person, by the way, had leprosy. That means he had Hansen's disease. That's been diagnosed after 2,000 years, and he was buried in the vale in the Hinnom Valley, which is also the word where we get the word hell, Gehenna. That word has been translated by our theological masters within Christendom into hell. Okay, all right. So follow me along here. You're going to hear things, and then basically this is what a family tomb would have looked like at that time. Somebody at the first year after death, and then later their bones put into an ossuary. And many of these have been found. We don't have time to go into all of this, but names of known people in the New Testament, like Caiaphas, the high priest, his ossuary has been found, and you go on down the line, including people mentioned in the Gospels and associated with Jesus' family. And as you know from the presentation, Jesus, son of Joseph, is also one of those whose ossuary has been found. You know that's a great shock to Christians that are not of the more universalist type faith, we might say. Okay, so what happened? There were certain holidays when the Romans and the temple establishment would get very worried about rebellions in occupied Palestine, and Pesach, Passover, was one of them. Okay, and the reason why is because Passover tells the idea of freedom from slavery. Now, it's based on national myth, but nevertheless, it was a time when everyone got very, very nervous. Well, it just so happens that a certain Galilean rebel showed up on the temple establishment at Passover time, went into the very place where forgiveness was being brokered for money, and started overthrowing the temple, the money changers, tipping all that stuff, and here's a great cartoon that says, celebrate Holy Week by flogging a banker. It's what Jesus would have done. Okay, so that's what happened, and that's what got him crucified. Okay, he didn't claim to be God or any of the other stuff, that came up late in the stories that were told later. He attacked the money establishment. Some things never change, right? Okay, and he attacked that establishment, he and his followers, and the Romans said, and the temple establishment got together, the priests and the Romans, and the Herodian courts, which was an Idumean sub-vassal of Roman control up in the Palestine north, which is the Galilee, and they made sure that he was crucified. And this is an artist's reconstruction on the most likely place, not the later traditional Constantinian places of where the crucifixion occurred. It would have occurred right across facing, right where people would come into Jerusalem, so the Romans could say, yep, remember who's in charge around here. And the Romans, of course, did this to thousands of people over the time of Roman occupation. Okay, now it just so happens, we know from direct archaeological evidence that an early resurrection faith arose, and it matches what is in our earliest source, Q. Okay, so this right here is Greek uncial script here, but it also has essentially a Greek pronunciation of a Hebrew word, Yahu, which was the name of the Hebrew God. Okay, and it says the divine Yahu raises up, and there was this icon. This is on one of the ossuaries, and there is this icon here of a fish. Okay, and a male figure or a man figure, a stick figure, sticking its head out of the fish. And guess what that says in Hebrew there? Jonah, right? In Q, there is a saying where it says, no signs will be given to this corrupt generation except the sign of the Son, the sign of Jonah, which, as Jonah was in the fish, in the belly for 3 days, 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the belly of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. This right here, what you're looking at here, is the earliest representation of the resurrection faith, not the later thing where you've got stones being rolled away and corpses walking around Jerusalem and earthquakes. Whoops, I lost something happened here. Skip that. I will stop share for a second, and pull that back up. And then we shall share again. There we are. Okay, we're back live again, I guess. All right, so that was found, this published in Charlesworth and so forth. Of course, remember, this is the time of the double burial practice. I'll go through this part. This is one of those sets of ossuaries and so forth. And again, we're asking the question, how was Mark's original, because that was the first gospel written, which just said they found an empty tomb and they went away scared, and they were told by a young man there, you'll see him in the Galilee, right? And that is a late tradition. There is an earlier tradition, And Christianity has often forgotten this one. This is one of the primary source. And when we say witnesses, we mean those who had appearances, sightings, visions of Jesus. And you can go to 1 Corinthians, which is where you find this, which in outline basically says that Jesus appeared after his death to this is not an uncommon phenomenon, actually. Appeared to different disciples, and then Paul said, and last of all, I saw him about 500 people on a mountain and all of that. But what is very interesting about this whole passage is that it knows nothing about any of those traditions that are in the later Gospels. It says this. It says, what kind of body comes out in the resurrection? All right. Now, mind you, throughout history, there have been what are been called corpse resuscitations. Every generation has them. Every family has them. Not every family, but every time has them. Every culture has them. This is where people look clinically dead and they come back to life. Okay, that's not what the earliest Jesus movement meant when they talked about resurrection. They meant something far more metaphorical, far more spiritual, if you will. Okay, and that was this. And what happened is in this early letters of Paul used metaphors, okay? And this is genuine Paul, for instance. This is part of the letters which scholars have been traced back to Paul. There's a number of letters in the New Testament which are pseudo-Pauline, meaning they were written by others in his name, but they weren't actually written by him. And that can be shown from various forms of scholarship. Okay, well, what it says is this: what's sown does not come to life without dying. Right, now that is a statement that is actually true in modern science too, right? New life doesn't come except from death. Okay, all right, and it says, and then he begins going through a bunch of metaphors. A bare grain is thrown into the ground, and what will happen when that seed grows, God knows. That's essentially what he says, which is another way of saying the genes will determine it or some other mechanism. God knows, right? Okay, and each seed will have its own body. An acorn will become an oak, a prickly pear cactus seed will become a prickly pear, and so forth. And this is, of course, true throughout the history of life. I'm an evolutionary biologist. And after every great extinction, and there have been many of them, here's a map over the last 542 million years. After every extinction, new life forms have come up. These are not corpse resuscitations, mind you. These are new life replacing what was before. Okay, so what you're looking at here, if you allow that we can take first century metaphors and understand them in modern terms, what I'm suggesting to you is that they're touching on very deep, real themes here. Okay, all right. So what is sown does not come to life without dying, and that is true in all living things. Then it goes on and says, verse 36 of that chapter, what kind of body comes with the resurrection? All right, and then it makes plain that basically the kind is determined by causes before. God gives it the body as he wills. Okay, all right, and this is true throughout life, and every type of organism perpetuates its type by genetics. Okay, but it does say this. It says the body that is sown is not the body that will be. And that is true in the species of life, and that is also true in the development of oak trees and all of that, and that is true with every death that inspires new life elsewhere. Okay? Notice that we are talking about a pretty deep subject because all of us face, even taxes aren't inevitable, right? You can evade taxes, okay? Okay, but all of us who have arrived by birth in the birth canal to this earth are going out feet first, right? That's always the way it is. Yes. Okay, those are the things that are inevitable, but what we're looking at here is something that is greater and broader. Okay, so the body that is sown is not the body that will be. And then he goes through and talks in his terms there, using the Greek language, saying, well, men, the flesh of men is not the same as animals and birds and fish. They don't equal each other. They all have their own characteristics, which are genetically determined. We can say now because we realize that. But notice that the body in all ways, the body that is sown is not the body that will be afterwards. Okay, so, and you can see that with the oak tree, the butterfly. So this is a ubiquitous principle in nature. Okay, and of course, all of us are related to every living thing on earth. Well, our last principle, which says respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, we are actually, this isn't just a mystical statement. This is an actual genetic statement. We are genetically related to everything that exists. Every living thing on our planet is a cousin to us, okay, at some level. Okay, for instance, most of our beloved pets, which are dogs and cats, are about the 27 millionth cousin of us. Okay, rats, which we don't like as much, are actually only 17 millionth cousin. They're more closely related to us and to the primates. Okay, so yes, I know rats are more closely related to us than the little puppies and kitties that we all love so much. Okay, but here's the important part: we're all a family. That's the important part. That's why we can't do damage to any part without doing damage to all, right? Okay, and of course, here's some of the transformations which can take place. The body which is sown is not the same as the body which comes out the other side. And those are, Luna moths there, for instance, from caterpillars. It also goes on and says there are different bodies. There are bodies heavenly and bodies earthly. Okay, and it uses the term, soma epurania, which means from the heavens, or somata epigaya, which means from earth. What we know today, of course, is that the same stuff that the heavens are made out of is what the stuff on earth is. We're all stardust, right? All of our elements are made in the stars, so it's actually united there. And you can go through from the knowledge of what was known there. He is touching on a deep truth, even though he didn't know the science of what we're talking about here. Okay, and then he goes on and says these interesting things here. He says, after he's given all these metaphors, he said, so also is the resurrection of the dead. It's sown in dissolution, awakened in corruption, sown in dishonor, awakened in glory, sown in weakness, awakened in power, sown a body physical or natural, awakened a body spiritual or pneumatic. Okay, that can be very puzzling for people of a scientific bent. Then what he's not talking about here is the cheap dualism that is so prevalent in religion today. That's not what's being spoken of here. In other words, what you have, what all of us have, which is the soma psychikon, which is essentially like our physical soulish bodies, okay, are not the same as the soma pneumatikon or pneumatikon, which is the proper way to pronounce the Greek, not the Erasmian Theological Seminary way of mispronouncing and abusing Greek, right? Okay, so that right there, he is talking about that there is a part of us, and even Spinoza, the great monist of of the rationalist time in the Enlightenment said there is a part of us which thinks some of the thoughts of God, if you will, which does not die when the physical part of us passes away. Why? Because all of us are conceived as being part of God. Remember, in the meditation, I asked you to conceive of God as not a being among beings, right? But as the ground of being, as the totality of everything, which is actually, by the way, what every advanced mystic in every religion secretly knows, that that's the way it really is. Not these various idolatrous ideas of the guy with big white hair in the sky, or Santa Claus, or whatever, all of the mythical things that are spoken there. So now I'm going to take you on. All right, then it also says some of this. Now, remember that at the time you were living in most people in the world were slaves at that time. About 60% of people living in the Roman Empire were slaves. Okay, owned by somebody else, right? Okay, and the people were under military occupation. Now the Romans were fairly tolerant about let people have their own religions. They welcome to just be all part of the big pantheon of religions, just as long as you made sure Caesar was number one, right? Okay, but what you had, of course, was a radical movement within the Galilee that said things like all people are created equal, and that really God gives forgiveness as free as rain, not brokered through some temple project or some other powerful Caesar in Rome and all that kind of stuff. That's why everybody hated it, right? All the power structures hated it. Remember, there used to be a time when before it was called Christianity, that it was actually subversive, not kissing up to power the way it does today. Okay, so when I show you some Christian iconography to help illustrate this, what we're going to do is note something very important. There was an old tradition, and this is the Pseudo-Petrine late second century, but is part of that set of Christians which or followers of the original Jesus, who did not go along with the direction that Christianity was going at that time. Okay, and it said this about that Christ suffered once for sins. Christ is not a last name. It just means the Messiah. Okay, was not considered God either. Okay, that didn't come until later. Okay, remember the Unitarian part of our faith preserves something very important. There isn't a man that was God. Okay, that's not, and people died for that, by the way. People got killed over that subject, Okay, so was put to death, in the flesh, having been made alive in spirit. Okay, which meant the resurrection was spiritual. It was not corpses walking out of tombs or anything like that. Okay, and then he went and traveled to the imprisoned spirits. Now this has caught the imagination of many people, because this is what is called the harrowing of Hades, Hades. Okay, and this particular historian, Jesus scholar, John Dominic Crossan, and his wife Sarah Sexton Crossan have written a book called Resurrecting Easter. Okay, where they go and explore the iconography that shows that in the original view, the Messiah, as he went into hell, or into the grave, Hades, Sheol, okay, stirred up the dead and liberated them. But this was done spiritually, okay? And not in the sense like people who go to heaven and go to hell, like in modern teachings. That wasn't it at all. They need to be awakened. That was what the idea was. And the iconography showed that that they were bringing out people from down there. In fact, everyone. Okay, and this was what the original view said in 1 Corinthians. If you actually look at it carefully, it says that everybody is made alive. There is no separation between saved and damned, which was a later development in all of that. Okay, so you can ask me more questions about this later. Here's an early image that shows both the father and the mother, and of course these are metaphorical characters, the man and the mother, Adam and Eve, which fundamentalists have turned into literal characters, of course, but they symbolize the whole entire human race being pulled up. And this is throughout the centuries, there was this idea of the harrowing of Hades, okay, which constituted early Christian views, okay? And this is the place that I was referring to where it says, we have not followed sophisticated myths, and it doesn't talk about any appearances. It just says, we saw him on a mountain afterwards, okay? Which was a visionary appearance. And this is Mount Tabor in the Galilee, okay? And this is what Mount Tabor looks like. And the way it was looked back earlier in this century before Palestine's occupation and all these hideous stuff was planted all over the place. Okay, so here it is. And this is a natural phenomenon, by the way. It's called specter of the Brocken. I just threw some pictures so you could see. It's better than art in a sense. But what you see here is the idea that the original Jesus movement wanted to liberate everybody. Okay. Now, later on developed. Now, and I want to close with this. This is a fresco from the 2nd and 3rd century. It's in the catacombs of Priscilla in Rome. Okay, and notice that it gives priority. It knows where the priority is. Remember that in later Matthew, there was a parable of the sheep and the goats, right? They were going to be divided, the sheep on the right hand and the goats on the left hand, right? Okay. Notice that here is this figure. This is the good shepherd here, right? Here's the sheep on his left and the goats on his right. But before that tradition, there was an earlier tradition that talked about the good shepherd, which this one actually traces back to Jesus, that says he would leave everything and go and find the one that was lost. Notice that the one that is lost on the shoulder is a goat. See that? And that takes priority and precedence over the division between sheep and goats, which all of Christian history is trying to determine who the sheep and the goats are, right? Okay. There isn't, in the eyes of an actually infinite God that actually followed love, no parent worth any of his or her salt would cast aside a single one of their children. And that's what the radical idea is in Christian universalism. There's a lot more meat on this bone, and we'll unpack more of it at another time. And I thank you very much for your attention today. I guess I would like to close with this quote, and I'm going to let this be the benediction here. My point, once again, is not that those ancient people told literal stories and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but they told them symbolically and we are now dumb enough to take them literally. Thank you.
Our closing hymn is number 134, Our World is One World, from the gray hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn number 134, Our World is One World. Thank you, Lee, for sharing your valuable time and insights with us this morning. It is sincerely appreciated, and we look forward to hearing from you again. In the interest of time, we will skip the Q&A session this week. However, please feel free to share your thoughts with one another during our lunch in the parish hall. Please keep in mind that our congressional meeting will be held here in the sanctuary at noon. And you are now welcome to adjourn into the parish hall. Thank you.